Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time when winter wasn't just a season. It was a survival challenge. Imagine this. You're a medieval peasant, the leaves are barely done falling, and already the wind bites like it's got a grudge. Your breath fogs in the air, your boots are damp, and the frost isn't just dusting the windows, it's working its way into your bones. The summer wheat? Gone. The apples? Half rotten or shriveled in sacks? And that pig you raised? Either already eaten, or too precious to touch until things get really bad. You probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this sleepy little community reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wind has turned sharp, and you can feel it in your joints, even though you're only 23. That's basically medieval middle-aged. You wrap your wool cloak tighter, fraying at the sleeves, and stare out across the stubbled fields. The harvest is done. The last of the barley was threshed 3 days ago, and the straw's been dragged into the thatched roof to keep out the chill. But you know, it won't be enough. It never is. There's a strange panic that creeps in as the first frost settles. You've seen this before. The hurried tucking of vegetables into root cellars, the frantic scouring for firewood, and the whispered barters at market for salt, grain, even onions. Anything that stores, anything that lasts. Because what you got now, that's all you'll have till April, if you're lucky. You watch your neighbor drag a sack of something, turnips maybe, into his cottage. He's trying to look casual, but everyone knows that sack is life insurance. In lean years, people have fought over worse. You head inside your own home. The scent is sharp, smoke, drying herbs, the faint sour of old cheese. You check your shelves, which are more like mud-plastered ledges stuck into the wall. A few clay pots of preserved plums. Half a wheel of cheese wrapped in waxy linen. Some dried broad beans. Barley flour in a coarse sack tied tight to keep the mice out. And one lonely smoked fish hanging from a hook by the chimney. You don't even want to know if it's still good. That fish may be your Christmas dinner. You've learned to count everything by the day. Every egg laid, every spoonful of lentils, every twist of salt pork. That's a decision. Eat it now and feel full for a night, or stretch it, just maybe, and live another week. Historians still argue whether peasants in your region ever had surplus years. Some records claim periodic abundance, but others point to skeletal remains that tell a darker story. Malnutrition, stunted growth, teeth worn down by grain grit. So much for a golden age. But you're not thinking of bones. You're thinking of what's left in the smokehouse and how much colder it'll get once December hits. There's a trick you learned from your grandmother. Rub lard into your boots to keep them pliable and water resistant. It works, sort of. Your toes are still numb, but at least they're not wet. Outside, children gather the last windfall apples. They're sour, bird-pecked, and bruised. But they'll be stewed down into something edible. Maybe with a bit of honey if someone didn't already trade it for a candle. You shake your head. Kids don't know how lucky they are. Of course, neither do you. You go out to check the root pit, really just a hole lined with straw and covered with sod. There's a trick to it. Too cold, and your carrots turn to mush. Too warm, and they sprout. Today, it's just right. You reach down and brush aside the straw, fingers fumbling in the dirt, and pull out a knobby parsnip. Not exactly a delicacy, but it's sweet enough when roasted. If you've got firewood, that's another thing. Firewood isn't free. Technically, all the woods around here belong to Lord Blackwell, who's probably snoring in his feather bed, belly full of pheasant. You're not supposed to cut trees, but deadfall is fair game. So tomorrow you'll head out at dawn to gather what the wind brings down. You just hope the reeve isn't watching. He fined old Merritt a whole shilling last week for taking a log the size of your arm. And no, you don't have a shilling. You have 3 turnips and an aching back. You trade what you can, some eggs, maybe a skein of homespun wool, for a pinch of salt or a slab of rendered fat. Fat is gold this time of year. Not just for frying, but for making tallow candles, waterproofing boots, and spreading on bread so thin you can see the crust through it. Butter? That's summer's luxury. Now it's fat or nothing. Your cousin Edith once tried to fry onions in snowmelt and goose grease. The result smelled like heaven and tasted like boiled regret. You ate every bite. At night, you tuck yourself into bed with all your clothes still on, a stone-warmed brick at your feet, and the hope that the wind won't blow the shutters loose again. The roof creaks. A mouse scuttles by. Someone coughs, deep and rattling from the other side of the room. Probably your father. He says it's just the cold. You hope that's true. It's not all bleak. There's the tavern once a week, if you can spare the coin for watered ale and news from the next village. There's laughter, bad lute playing, someone with a dog that always manages to sneak bread crusts. And sometimes, someone has a story about a miracle saint, or a talking goose, or a man who survived on nettles alone. You laugh because it's ridiculous, but also because it might come to that. You remember last winter when the snow came early and the hens stopped laying by mid-December. You remember the hush that settled in the village. Not the quiet of peace, but the tight silence of people conserving energy, of mouths chewing slowly, of children asking if there was more and adults not answering. This year, you've got a bit more, some oats, a sealed jar of pickled cabbage, even a little honeycomb. But that doesn't mean you're safe. Not until the frost lifts and something green pokes through the mud. You curl deeper under your wool blanket. Thin from years of wear. Somewhere an owl hoots. The fire crackles. Soft, tired, and you close your eyes thinking not about spring, but about tomorrow's breakfast. Because if there's one thing you've learned, it's this. The cold may come for your fingers, but hunger always comes for your gut. And in winter, hunger is patient. It can wait. It always waits. Morning arrives in shades of gray. There's no sunrise, really. Just a slow, reluctant brightening of the sky that filters through the tiny window in your wattle and daub wall. The air is thick with your own breath. It fogs in little clouds as you pull on stiff hose and patchwork boots, the ones stuffed with straw in place of proper soles. Your joints ache, not from illness, just from existing in a house where indoors is mostly a suggestion, and the wind has visitation rights. The house smells like damp wool and ash. The hearth has gone cold overnight, and you prod the coals, hoping something might still be alive in there. No luck. You sigh and kneel to blow a flame into life with the dry bits of bracken you gathered last week. Your fingers are slow from cold, and for a minute you think the fire might not come. But then it catches. A flicker, a puff, and soon the familiar scent of burning oak curls into the air. You need heat, not just for comfort, but for survival. Because without a fire, everything goes bad. Your bread gets damp and moldy, your root vegetables rot faster, and most critically, you can't cook. And uncooked food in winter is just an invitation to stomach cramps and regret. This is when you check the root cellar. It's not really a cellar in the sense that would impress anyone from the future. It's more like a dirt-lined pit with a trapdoor above it. You kneel, grip the iron handle, cold as betrayal, and lift the lid. A wave of earthy scent greets you. Beets, potatoes, carrots, all buried in straw and half sleeping through the season. You reach in and pluck out a few sad-looking parsnips and a shriveled cabbage that smells slightly sour but still edible. Root vegetables are winter's darlings. They store well in cold, moist environments. which is lucky because that's the exact definition of your entire house. Some people go fancy and hang onions from the rafters or suspend garlic in little braids. Others just toss everything into the pit and hope the frost doesn't sneak in. You? You're somewhere in between. Practical, slightly lazy, and guided mostly by whatever your grandmother used to do. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had a true understanding of food preservation, or if they were just winging it based on trial, error, and which neighbor died of food poisoning last year. But what you do know is that your family has always done it this way, and most of them survive to complain about it. You drag your finds to the table, which wobbles like it's haunted, and begin chopping with your belt knife. It's not sharp, but it's yours, and it gets the job done. Into the pot goes a bit of water, the vegetables, a pinch of dried herbs, and, if you're feeling fancy, a spoonful of bacon dripping saved from better days. It's a stew. It's always a stew. You glance up as your sister stirs under the shared wool blankets on the floor. She coughs, then groans. "Any porridge?" she asks. You shrug. "Soon, just warming it." She rolls back over, clearly unimpressed. Breakfast is whatever you've managed to keep from freezing. Sometimes it's thin gruel made with oats, sometimes just stale bread soaked in warm milk, when there's milk. On better days, there's a spoonful of honey or jam left from summer. But those are rare now. The trick isn't just having food, it's having space to store it and knowing where to put what. Potatoes and turnips do best in the cellar. Cheese? You wrap it in linen and hang it near the rafters where the air is cool but not too damp. Apples? Those go in a barrel layered with straw or ash. It sounds clever, but really it's just desperation that's been handed down like a family recipe. Some villages even use spring-fed caves as natural refrigerators. Your friend Hamlin once bragged about how his uncle's apples lasted all the way to Candlemas. You're still not sure if you believe him. You take a moment to inspect your clay jars. One has souring milk, which may yet become curds if the gods of chemistry are smiling. Another has dried plums, shriveled but sweet. You debate adding a few to the stew just for a hint of flavor. But then you think better of it. Plums are for feast days, or, failing that, bribes. The smoke from the hearth curls lazily toward the ceiling, where it collects like a ghost trying to escape. Your eyes sting, but the warmth is worth it. You poke the stew and watch as bubbles form, slow, thick, promising. There's a reason so much winter food was boiled. Boiling is safer, it drenches ingredients, it softens the hard things, roots, grains, old bread, and pulls out flavor where you'd swear there was none. It's humble magic. And in a world where ovens are communal and yeast is a mystery you beg from the baker, your little iron pot is both lifeline and altar. Your neighbor knocks on the door. It's old Maud, wrapped in furs and irritation. "You still got that onion?" she asks without greeting. You nod cautiously. "Trade you half a wedge of dried apple, still sweet." You narrow your eyes. Maud's apples are usually sweet in theory and leathery in practice. But dried fruit is dried fruit, and your stew could use something. You agree. The trade is made with solemn nods. She leaves with the onion, and you add the apple to your pot. A win. And yet, even now you wonder, was it worth it? The stew tastes acceptable. Warm, a bit salty, with notes of earth and trying your best. You share it out in wooden bowls, and everyone eats in silence, except for the occasional slurp or murmur of approval. There's no concept of a balanced diet here. You eat what's available, what doesn't make you sick, and what fills your belly for a few hours. You clean the bowls with crusts of bread, dry them near the hearth, and stash them under the bench. Then it's time to check the clay shelves built right into the wall. your medieval pantry. There's a jar of pickled onions, a lump of lard sealed in wax, and a small cloth bundle of dried nettles. Not glamorous, but useful. Dried nettles, by the way, are kind of a medieval superfood. You steep them in hot water for a kind of tea. It's bitter, green, and vaguely healthy, or so people say. Your cousin swears it fixes everything from coughs to heartbreak. You tried it once and mostly just needed to pee a lot. Still, you'll probably make some later. You glance around the room, this cramped, smoke-streaked little world. The walls are thick with mud and straw. The floor is packed earth, swept smooth each morning with a bundle of reeds. The ceiling is low, the beams darkened by years of fire smoke. But it's home. It keeps the worst of the cold out, mostly. And when it doesn't, well, there's always another layer of wool. Winter isn't just a season, it's a state of mind. You live slower, quieter, more aware of every crack in the walls and every crumb in the cupboard. You measure time not by sunlight, but by what's left in the sack of barley. The stew pot simmers again with the next batch of vegetable scraps. You hum a bit as you stir. It's not much, but it's warm, and right now that's enough. You wake to the sound of something hard striking wood. Not thunder, not footsteps. Just a dull clunk repeating. You sit up, blanket still tangled around your legs, and realize it's the neighbor's son chopping frozen turnips with an axe. Again, welcome to winter cuisine. Today's main event? Porridge. You sigh, roll your shoulders, and start the daily routine of coaxing breakfast out of barely anything. There's a sack of oats tucked under the bench, coarse, a bit dusty, and probably home to more than one weevil. But you've stopped caring. You flick a few out, mutter an apology to no one in particular, and toss the rest into your pot with water from yesterday's melted snow. Porridge isn't glamorous, but in winter it's the dependable friend who never leaves. Every medieval peasant has eaten more porridge than they care to admit. Wheat porridge, barley porridge, oat porridge. Sometimes rye if you're feeling dangerous. You can cook it with milk if you've got any, or water if you don't. Some people add scraps of bacon fat. Others stir in dried beans. Once you heard a monk made his with fish guts and called it soul cleansing. You didn't ask questions. You stir your pot slowly, watching it thicken into that familiar beige swamp. It smells like history and despair, and maybe comfort if you're hungry enough, which you usually are. There's a trick to good porridge: patience. Boil it too hard, and it burns at the bottom, leaving little black flakes in every bite. Not that you toss it out, you just pretend the burnt bits add depth. As the mixture bubbles, you remember how porridge used to be more than food. It was a statement. Not in the fashion sense, of course, but in terms of survival. In lean times, it's what separated the full from the faint. Rich folks might dabble in porridge, sweeten it with dates or milk, serve it from silver bowls. You eat it from a rough wooden spoon, chipped at the edge and warmed by years of use. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had enough calories to get through winter without starvation. Some skeletal remains show signs of chronic undernourishment. Others suggest that porridge-heavy diets, while repetitive, could just barely meet survival needs, assuming you didn't burn too many calories chopping firewood or, say, chasing runaway pigs. Speaking of pigs, you glance toward the door where your neighbor's sow squeals from its pen. Lucky them. Pork means lard, sausage, trotters for stew, and blood pudding if you're bold. You're not bold, not when it comes to pig's blood. The porridge is nearly done. It trembles gently like it knows what's coming. You dip your spoon in, blow on it, and taste. It's bland naturally, but warm and thick and oddly grounding. You add a few flakes of salt, stir again, and ladle it into bowls. Your brother grumbles as he sits up, blanket around his shoulders like a monk's robe. Porridge again? You raise an eyebrow. You want a feast? Catch a goose. He shrugs, then eats. Everyone does. That's winter's rule, no complaints unless you're cooking. You add the dregs of yesterday's stew to the remaining porridge and set the pot aside. That'll be lunch or supper, depending on when hunger hits hardest. Stretching meals is both an art and a grim necessity. A clever cook in your village once said that any food could last twice as long if served in a small bowl and followed by silence. She wasn't wrong. Once the bowls are clean, or at least not actively filthy, you check your pantry again. The same inventory stares back at you. Dried beans, old flour, pickled onions. You pull out the beans. Soak them in snow water. They'll need hours, maybe all day, to soften. While you wait, you grind a bit of barley for more porridge later. The quernstone squeals in protest. It's slow work, your arm aching after just a few turns, but the rhythm is oddly calming. Grains fall like sand, collecting in the wooden bowl below. This flour is rough, dark, full of bran and grit. You'll mix it with water and flatten it into a crude flatbread later, cooked right on the hearthstone. You sometimes envy townsfolk who have access to proper bakeries, with their yeast and communal ovens. But then you remember they also have to deal with the miller's fees and the baker's thumb. Literally a thumb's worth of flour taxed from every batch. Your mother once told you about a year when the miller took too much. The villagers tied him to the water wheel in protest. Whether that's true or just dramatic bedtime legend, you're not sure. But the mental image warms you more than the fire. Mid-morning brings another visitor. A traveling tinker with 2 donkeys and a cart full of broken dreams. He offers to trade pots, patches, or sharpened knives for anything edible. You glance at your barley flour and shake your head. He shrugs, throws you a wink, and offers a bit of news instead. Says the next village over is out of salt. Their winter pork's gone bad. They're boiling it anyway. You thank him and trade a cup of hot porridge for a tale about a knight who supposedly defeated hunger by fasting until spring. His armor didn't fit afterward, the tinker says with a grin, then trots away. You're still thinking about that night when you step outside to stretch your legs. Snow crunches underfoot. Your breath curls like smoke. A few chickens peck near the door, beaks buried in frost. You check the coop. 1 egg. Glorious, golden, and fragile as your patience. You hold it like treasure and consider breakfast again. No, save it. It could be an ingredient or a bribe, or part of tomorrow's supper. Every egg in winter is a decision with weight. Back inside, the beans are swelling nicely in their pot. You add a pinch of crushed nettle, a spoon of lard, and a few dried herbs. It smells adequate. Lunch is served. As you eat, you recall your uncle's claim that porridge used to be a sacred food, offered to the hearth spirit, blessed by monks, even used in weddings. He also claimed to have once seen a ghost eating porridge by moonlight, so grain of salt. Still, the idea of porridge having spiritual value is oddly comforting. Maybe if you eat enough, the gods will notice and send spring a little early. Probably not, though. By dusk, the sky turns the color of pewter, and the cold creeps back in like it never left. You refill the stew pot with water, soak more beans, and tuck the flour away. You hang your spoon on its nail, bank the fire with coals, and settle into your straw mattress beside your siblings. Tomorrow, you'll eat porridge again. And you'll be grateful. Sort of. You're up before the sun again. But that's not saying much, because in the dead of winter, the sun barely bothers to show up at all. Just a slow smudge of gray over the tree line, like the sky is trying to remember how to be alive. Today is forage day. You pull on your roughest, warmest clothes, the ones still stiff from last week's damp, and cinch your belt a little tighter. Not because you've lost weight, though you probably have, but because it gives the illusion of being full. A medieval trick. If you can't fill your belly, squeeze it. You sling your basket over your shoulder, tuck a hunk of cold barley bread into your coat for lunch, and head out toward the woods. It's you and a few others from the village. Not a formal expedition, more like a quiet understanding. If we don't find something out there, we'll be scraping lichen off the walls come February. The forest feels ancient in the snow. The trees all hunched like old monks, their limbs weighed down with frost. It's quiet except for the crunch of boots and the occasional sniffle. You keep your eyes low, not because you're ashamed, though that too, but because the ground is where the good stuff hides. Foraging in winter is like treasure hunting with 0 clues and 1 functioning nostril. First stop, wild garlic. You know the place. A little dip near the frozen stream where the earth breathes slightly warmer. If the ground isn't too hard, you can dig some up. Your knife scrapes through frost, then hits a soft patch. Jackpot. A handful of narrow bulbs, sharp-smelling, life-giving. You wrap them in cloth like they're pearls. Next, you check the rotting logs for mushrooms. Not the obvious ones. Winter mushrooms don't shout, they lurk. Pale, rubbery, and half-frozen, they peek out from under moss like shy cousins at a family feast. You find a few. One has a slug frozen to it. Bonus protein? You chuckle to yourself. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants knew which mushrooms were safe. Some say they used trial and error, mostly error. Others claim knowledge was passed down carefully, guarded like a family secret. You stick to what your grandmother taught you. If it smells like a wet boot but doesn't scream back, it's probably dinner. Along the way, you gather pine needles. Bitter, yes, but good for tea. Your aunt swears they keep the scurvy away. You also collect bark scrapings, moss, for insulation, not eating, unless you're really desperate, and a few stray nuts. Most are hollow or bug-eaten, but 1 acorn is intact. You pocket it like gold. Your friend Jory finds a squirrel nest. Empty now, but it means the area's been stashed with food. You both scan the branches. There, wedged in the crook of a limb, a cache of nuts and seeds. You climb, ignoring the creak in your knees, and recover a small stash. Not much, but enough to toast on the hearth tonight. The squirrel probably hates you now, but winter's no time for guilt. The cold bites harder as the wind picks up. Snow begins to fall in those slow, lazy flakes that seem pretty until they soak through your gloves. You chew on your barley bread, hard enough to chip a tooth, and sip melted snow from your leather flask. Lunch of champions. On the way home, you stumble across a patch of rose hips, red, wrinkled, clinging to the thorns like stubborn little fruits. You pluck them carefully, mindful of the tiny hairs inside that make your throat itch. They'll make tea. Maybe even jelly if you had sugar, which you don't, but you'll steep them anyway. Add honey if you're rich, or dreams if you're not. Back in the village, you share your finds. It's an unspoken rule. A handful for you, a pinch for the stew pot, a whisper for the old woman down the lane who hasn't left her bed in 3 days. Kindness is currency, and one day it might be you needing someone's mushroom stash. Sort the hall by the fire. Garlic bulbs, a few wild mushrooms, a handful of pine needles, cracked walnuts, 2 tiny apples that somehow survived a frost, and that 1 perfect acorn. You line them up like medals. Dinner is a wild forage stew, if you're generous with definitions. You slice mushrooms, add the pine needles, and toss in a few of yesterday's beans for bulk. You even break out the pickled onions. Your brother makes a face, but eats anyway. You chew slowly, savoring every hint of bitterness, every trace of earth. This is food the forest gave you. Quiet food, patient food, food that doesn't care if you're noble or nothing. Afterward, your grandmother tells the story again, the one about the man who survived a whole winter on roots and bark, and came out stronger than before. You nod along not because you believe it, but because her voice is warm and steady, like a blanket in story form. The fire is low, the pot is empty, the wind howls like it's trying to steal the last of your warmth. But you're okay. You found food today. You won today. The butcher's gone quiet this winter. Not because he's dead, though that wouldn't be shocking, given his tendency to sample raw sausage, but because there's nothing left to butcher, at least not officially. You pull your cloak tighter against the morning wind as you pass his shop. The shutters are drawn and a streak of blood, old, frozen, marks the doorstep. Probably from the last pig slaughtered before the snow stuck for good. Meat in winter is a luxury, a legend, a shimmering dream that smells faintly of bacon and regret. If you're a peasant, which you are, you likely haven't had real meat since late autumn. Maybe around Michaelmas, when the last of the pigs were traditionally slaughtered to avoid feeding them through the lean months. Everything after that? Salted, smoked, or fantasized. Your household has one strip of pork fat left, cured and curled like an ancient scroll. It's kept wrapped in cloth, hidden behind a pot of beans, and only brought out during very special moments. Like if someone gets married, or dies. Sometimes both in the same week, but today, you might get meat. A whisper spreads through the village. Someone snared a rabbit. Your boots slide over the icy path as you follow the trickle of villagers heading toward old Cedric's place. He's the trapper, part legend, part menace, and fully incomprehensible. But when he sets snares, they catch. Usually, you push through the crowd huddled near his cottage. And there it is, held up by its limp back legs like a medieval lottery ticket. A rabbit. Scrawny, maybe diseased, but undeniably edible. Its fur is mottled with snowmelt, and its eyes are glassy. A perfect winter feast. Cedric squints at the group. She's mine, but I'll sell the meat. 1 strip per person. Fat goes to the priest. Bones to the dogs. No one argues. That's the unspoken peasant economy. Finders keepers, priests get perks, and bones. Well, bones go to whoever can boil them the longest. You wait in line, trade a small bundle of kindling for a finger-length piece of hind leg, and cradle it like treasure all the way home. When you arrive, the kitchen is already warm. The pot is bubbling. Your sister's chopping carrots like she's mad at them. You add the rabbit meat to the stew. It disappears instantly beneath the beans and broth. But the scent? Instant transformation. That one piece of rabbit unlocks a cascade of memories. Feasts, festivals, better years. Meat does that. Your mouth waters as the stew thickens. Even the dog sits up straighter. When it's ready, you divide it carefully. No second helpings, no tasting beforehand. Each bowl holds a small miracle. Warmth, protein, and that elusive flavor known only as meatiness. It's gone in minutes. You lean back, belly half full and heart oddly buoyant. 1 strip of rabbit stretched across 6 bowls, and suddenly winter seems slightly less impossible. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants consumed meat regularly or saved it strictly for holidays. Parish records suggest many had access to it seasonally, especially during autumn slaughter. But archaeological digs of peasant homes often find few animal bones, hinting that meat was precious, rare, and usually reserved for those who could hunt. Or steal. And no, before you ask, you're not technically allowed to hunt. All the game in the forest belongs to Lord Blackwell. Poaching is a hanging offense. But you know for a fact that someone in the village owns a crossbow with the serial number scraped off. You also know the reeve looks the other way if he gets the heart. Still, most of the meat you see in winter isn't fresh, it's salted. Salt pork, when you can get it, comes in gray slabs that smell vaguely like wet dog and store-bought despair. But boiled long enough with beans or barley or even just a cabbage leaf, it becomes stew. Always stew. There's also dried meat, though not everyone can afford the salt. Some air cure slices by hanging them near the hearth, turning them daily until they resemble leather belts. Others preserve meat in fat, creating something called confit, though you've never seen it done outside a manor kitchen. Then there's blood. Not the poetic kind, the literal kind. Blood pudding, blood sausages, blood pancakes. Yes, those are a thing. When a pig is slaughtered, nothing is wasted. The blood is mixed with oats or barley and spices, if you're fancy, and cooked into something hearty, dense, and disturbingly metallic in taste. Your family made it once. It looked like something scraped off a battlefield, but it fed everyone for 2 days. Even the cat tried it. And then there's awful organ meat. Liver, kidneys, heart. Rich in nutrients, terrible in smell. The brave eat it first, the desperate eat it cold. You've also heard tales, maybe myths, of communal roasts. whole pigs or sheep on spits shared by the entire village. You imagine the crackle of fire, the golden skin, the oil dripping into flames. But that's probably just a Yule fantasy, or maybe something from the manor. You've been to the Lord's feast once. One glorious, awkward, meat-stuffed evening when you were 12. You remember a roast swan, a real one, decorated with its own feathers after cooking, which was equal parts impressive and terrifying. You also remember eel pie, which tasted like sadness in pastry form, and a jelly made from boiled hooves that wobbled in time with your nausea. Still, it was meat. At the table now, someone sighs. Wish we had that rabbit's head. Makes good broth. Your grandmother scoffs. I remember when we ate crow. Actual crow. You believe her. She also claimed once to have made stew from hedgehog. Wrapped it in clay, baked it under coals, peeled the spines right off. You're not sure if that's a recipe or a warning. The fire pops, the pot is clean, and for the first time in weeks, you feel full. Just for tonight. You stretch out on the floor by the hearth, warm stone at your back, a wool blanket over your shoulders, and the lingering taste of rabbit on your tongue. Outside, snow falls soft and slow. Inside, no one speaks. Because right now, everyone is quietly, reverently thinking the same thing. That was meat. You wake up groggy, the smell of last night's rabbit stew still lingering faintly in the air, almost like a dream. But when you sit up and see the clean pot hanging above the hearth, dream over. Back to the usual suspects. Today is bread day. You stretch, cracking joints that feel like they've aged 3 decades overnight, and pull on your stiff boots. The sky outside is lead gray again, the kind of color that whispers, no sun today. Try again tomorrow. Bread is the backbone of your winter life, not the fluffy, crusty loaves you've maybe heard described by a wandering monk or the manor cook. No, your bread is the opposite of fluff. It's dense. It's flat. It's chewy in that this might dislocate my jaw sort of way, and you're grateful for every bite. You reach for the barley flour you ground yesterday. Still a decent amount, though the sack's growing noticeably lighter. You mix it with cold water, a pinch of salt, and maybe, just maybe, a touch of sour starter you've been nurturing on the shelf in a clay jar. It smells a bit off, like wet socks, but that's apparently normal. Yeast is weird like that. You knead the dough, if you can call it kneading. It's more like smearing a damp lump around a board until it stops fighting you. Then you pat it flat, slap it on a hot stone in the hearth, and let the fire do the rest. This is your flatbread, your survival disc, your edible plate. It won't rise, it won't be fluffy, but it'll fill you. You make several rounds, enough to last the day. Some will be eaten with beans, some with lard. One will end up as a spoon. One might even become a sandwich, if you had anything resembling a filling. Today, that's lard and garlic. A peasant's delight. Bread has always been your fallback. When the stew is gone, the beans haven't soaked, and the only thing in your pantry is dread you can still make bread. Historians agree that medieval peasants ate a lot of bread, sometimes up to 2 pounds a day. It was the staple, the default, the non-negotiable. Wheat bread was rare and considered high status. You mostly deal in barley, rye, and oat flour, rough, dark, and filled with enough fiber to challenge even the hardiest gut. There's a saying in your village, if it doesn't crack a tooth, it's not real bread. It's only funny until someone loses a molar. Some folks bake their loaves in clay domes they build over hot stones. Others walk their dough to the communal oven, the four banal, owned by the Lord, of course, and taxed accordingly. You have to pay to use it, either in coin, grain, or part of your finished bread. And don't even think about building your own oven without permission. That's illegal. Fires are dangerous. Fires mean burned houses, and burned houses mean lost taxes. so the local reeve keeps a close eye on smoke and soot. You remember one time old Oswin tried to build a personal oven out of bricks and faith. It lasted 2 weeks before the reeve tore it down and fined him 3 chickens. Oswin never baked again. But your family sometimes pools resources with the neighbors, makes enough dough for a dozen loaves, then pays the oven fee together. You walk down to the edge of the village where the stone oven sits inside a soot-streaked hut and wait your turn. Today, though, you're doing it all at home. Fire, stone, flatbread, simplicity at its finest. As you flip the latest piece off the hearthstone, it lets out a soft crackle, steam escaping from within. The scent is earthy, warm, and deeply unpretentious. You call everyone to eat. It's a humble breakfast, flatbread with a smear of goose fat, some leftover broth drizzled on top, and a single brave garlic bulb roasted to sweetness. Your brother complains. Your sister chews slowly, pretending it's meat. You say nothing. You just eat. Later, you prepare more dough for tomorrow. Might as well get ahead. As you work, you think about how bread tells a story. About your family, your status, your desperation. Lord Blackwell eats white bread. Fine flour sifted 3 times, light as a cloud. His table never sees rye, never sees oat. His bread is a symbol of power, even if it tastes bland. Yours? It's stone-baked, uneven and dark like the soil outside. But it keeps you alive. Still, not all bread is created equal. There's trenchers, stale slices used as edible plates. You've seen those at feasts. The rich scrape off their sauce-soaked bread and toss it to the servants, or dogs, or both. There's manche, the fancy white loaves, and maslin, a mixture of grains which is your bread most days. Whatever scraps of flour you have go into it, sometimes even chestnut flour when someone's feeling adventurous. Oh, and there's horse bread. You've never actually eaten it, but you've smelled it. Coarse grain, bran, beans, and whatever else is left from milling. Technically meant for horses, but some say it fills a belly just the same. You hope you never find out. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant got enough nutrients from bread alone. Some records suggest bread covered up to 80% of daily calories. Others note widespread nutritional deficiencies, especially in bad harvest years. Either way, when grain was scarce, people turned to substitutes. Acorns, pea flour, even sawdust. Yes, actual sawdust. You don't recommend it. By afternoon, you're baking again. This time for a neighbor who offered to trade a jar of honey for 6 flatbreads. A deal you'd be foolish to decline. You pack the bread in linen and walk it over. The honey is golden, thick, and slightly fermented. It smells like sunshine trapped in a jar. You take a long sniff before tucking it away. That's for tomorrow, or the next celebration, or maybe never. Just knowing it's there is enough. Back home, as you sit by the fire, a wedge of flatbread in one hand and a lukewarm mug of pine needle tea in the other. Your brother's already snoring. Your sister's mending socks with twine. The dog gnaws on the remains of yesterday's broth bone. Outside, the wind starts up again, howling past the shutter like a wolf denied entry. But inside, you've got bread. You've got fire. You've got one warm moment in a season built from cold. The morning begins with bells. You're not sure why it always surprises you. The church bell rings every day, matins, lauds, prime, and all the others you never fully memorized. But something about hearing it echo through the frozen stillness makes your stomach clench in a way that food can't fix. Today is a fast day. You groan. Of course it is. The church calendar rules everything: birthdays, feast days, weddings, planting, harvest, and yes, your stomach. And while feast days might get all the love in the stories, there are way more fast days. Over 100 a year, in fact. Some years it feels like every other day is either a fast or a vigil, which is a fast with better marketing. You pull on your cloak and shuffle outside, breath puffing out in little clouds, and make your way to the church square where the priest is already droning through something Latin. You catch words like caritas and penitentia, but mostly you're focused on staying awake. You're not just fasting from meat today. No dairy, no eggs, no cheese, no fat. Water, bread, and maybe some legumes if you're sneaky. It's a day of spiritual clarity, which is a poetic way of saying, please enjoy being even hungrier than usual. You mutter to your friend Tom as you pass him, "What's the saint today?" He shrugs. Does it matter? No meat either way. You nod grimly. It's true. Doesn't matter if it's Saint Somebody's Beard Day or the eve of Saint Anonymous the Forgotten. Your stew's going to be thin. Back at home, your sister's poking at a pot of lentils with the enthusiasm of someone about to drink dirty bath water. It's Friday, she mutters. Of course it is. Friday equals fish. You sigh. Because while you technically could have fish today, that assumes you live near a coast, a river, or a fishmonger. You don't. Your fish today will likely be salt herring if the trade cart makes it through the snow. If not, beans. With a bit of regret. And yet, some people try to get creative. You've heard of noble kitchens serving beaver tail on Fridays? Yes, really. Because it's considered fish-like. You'd try it. Not because you agree with the logic, but because it sounds like it has flavor. Historians still debate how strictly peasants followed fast days. Some believe the rules were bent all the time, especially in rural villages where oversight was scarce. Others suggest that the spiritual pressure combined with social expectation meant most folks did their best to comply, even if it meant chewing dry bread and pretending it was heavenly. You do your best too. Today's breakfast is, surprise, barley porridge, made with water and a pinch of wild herbs. You serve it plain, no fat, no drippings. Just humble mush in a wooden bowl. You eat in silence. Fasting is as much about quiet as it is about food. Later, you try to distract yourself with chores. Splitting kindling, mending a boot, scrubbing soot off the hearthstone with stale beer. But your stomach keeps reminding you, you're fasting. There's an odd sort of dignity to it. The knowing that everyone else is also hungry. That across the village and the country, and even across Christendom, millions of bellies are rumbling in rhythm with yours. It's solidarity in suffering. Or at least that's what the priest says. But solidarity doesn't make lentils taste better. Midday brings a small miracle. A traveling peddler with a barrel of salted eels. You don't ask how. You don't ask where from. You just trade 2 skeins of thread and a chunk of honeycomb for 1 slippery, glistening eel wrapped in damp cloth. Back home, you gut it over the hearth, toss the bones to the dog, and drop it into the bubbling lentil pot. The effect is immediate. The broth darkens, the scent rises. Your sister actually smiles. It's still a fast meal, but it feels rich, deeper, slightly rebellious. The eel stretches across 3 bowls. You eat slowly, eyes closed for a moment, pretending you're at the manor feast. You imagine golden platters and roasted game and the clink of silver. Then you open your eyes and remember you're holding a wooden spoon with a splinter in the handle. But still, this eel? It's luxury. You wipe the bowl with a crust of oat bread, chew thoughtfully, and glance out the window. Snow's falling again, of course. A slow, steady blanket that swallows sound and hope in equal measure. You remember one winter when the priest came down with a cough and couldn't hold services for weeks. It was chaos, no bells, no fasts. People ate meat on Wednesdays. Someone made stew during Lent. It felt like the world tilted on its axis. When the priest returned, he was pale, furious, and smelling faintly of onions. He fined half the village and made them attend Mass twice a day for a week. Since then, no one forgets a fast. You clean up the bowls, save the eel bones to boil for tomorrow, and wrap what's left of the lentils in cloth. You add a pinch of salt and a prayer because both seem equally valuable right now. Evening falls early. You light a single tallow candle and say the required prayers. Your sister mumbles through hers with a mouthful of cold bread. Your brother just nods and hopes no one notices. The fast has sharpened your senses, or maybe just made you irritable. Either way, the candle's flickering feels poetic, like you're meant to learn something from the hunger. You stretch out on the floor, watching the shadows sway on the rafters, and try not to think of cheese. Or fat. Or the pork you once traded for a comb and immediately regretted. Instead, you focus on the rhythm of winter. Eat, fast, eat, hope, eat, pray, fast again. The seasons change slowly, but hunger moves fast. And tonight, it's just a little slower, thanks to one blessed salty eel. You know it's going to be a strange day when the first thing you put in your mouth is a mug of warm ale. Not fresh ale, mind you. Nothing bubbly or golden or worth writing a poem about. No, this is small beer. A weak, watery brew that barely counts as alcohol. And definitely doesn't count as satisfying. But it's safer than water, and right now, that's the point. You take another sip and try not to gag. It tastes like someone whispered barley into a bucket and forgot to stir. Water, in your world, is not to be trusted. Not in winter, not ever. The well might be frozen. The stream probably has sheep standing in it. Or worse, upstream surprises. So, unless you're melting snow over the fire, your best bet is to drink something that's been boiled. Or fermented. Enter ale. Small beer is the lifeblood of winter hydration. Low in alcohol, but high in, hey, this won't kill you. It's brewed in batches and drunk almost immediately. You sometimes help your uncle mash the grains and stir the pot, his hands stained from years of brewing. The smell of malt and wet wood lingers long after. Historians agree even children drank ale. Not to get tipsy, but to avoid dysentery, which in fairness is a pretty good reason. Of course, if you're lucky, or just sneaky, you might get a taste of stronger stuff, like mead. Ah, mead. Honey wine. A golden liquid so rare and precious, it's mostly spoken of in poems and wedding songs. You've tasted it twice. Once at a midsummer feast, once at a funeral. Both times it tasted like drinking sunlight filtered through a memory, but today? No mead, no wine, no cider. Just your humble, lukewarm mug of barley sadness. Your sister brews her own sometimes, using scraps of bread and foraged herbs. Once she tried pine needles and nearly knocked out the entire family with what she proudly called forest surprise. You haven't let her forget it. You take another sip and move on with your morning. There's a pot of broth on the fire. Just water with bones, really. Bones from the rabbit, the eel, the old chicken you ate 2 weeks ago. Every bone is saved, every scrap boiled. The longer it simmers, the better it gets. You toss in a pinch of dried nettles, maybe some barley if there's still a handful left. It's more water than meal, but it warms you, and warmth is half the battle. Soup in winter isn't about flavor, it's about survival. Anything that can be boiled will be. Old roots, cabbage stalks, bits of lard, dried herbs. If it doesn't actively smell like poison, it goes in the pot. And then, of course, there's medicinal stew. That's what your grandmother calls it, at least. It's a mix of bones, roots, vinegar, garlic, and something she refuses to identify. Secret ingredient, she says, eyes twinkling like a woman who's seen death and offered him a bowl of broth. It doesn't taste great, but it does something. Clears the head, settles the gut, occasionally induces sleep so deep you wake up thinking it's spring. Historians still debate how effective these peasant brews were. Some swear by the healing properties of garlic, nettles, and bone marrow. Others suspect most of it was placebo, with the real magic coming from heat, hydration, and the comfort of routine. You ladle out 2 bowls of broth, pass one to your sister, and sip yours slowly. It's hot. That's enough. Outside, the snow is still falling, now with that annoying slant that somehow finds its way into your boots no matter what. You wrap up and head to the woodshed to check the firewood. It's low. Again. You mutter a few medieval curses under your breath. Firewood, like ale, is life. Without it, no boiling, no baking, no broth. Some families burn peat. Others dried cow dung. You've tried both. They burn. They stink. They do the job. You spend the better part of the day chopping, stacking, and trying not to lose fingers to the axe or the cold. Eventually, your arms feel like rope, and your breath comes out in big white clouds. But the pile grows. Progress in winter is measured in cords of wood and empty bowls. Back inside, the air is thick with smoke and steam. Your sister's made a beer soup, stale ale mixed with garlic and old bread. Sounds awful. Tastes actually not bad, especially with a spoon of lard stirred in. This, in your world, is comfort food. And yes, you save the leftover liquid. Tomorrow's soup base. Your grandmother insists on a warm drink before bed. Not tea, too expensive. Not wine, too rare. Instead, she boils herbs. Chamomile, if she has it. More often, nettle or mint. You sip it slowly, feeling the heat spread through your chest like a fading candle. Sometimes you sneak in a little ale with honey. Just a splash. Just enough to take the edge off, because winter is long, and even the smallest comfort, the smallest warmth, can feel like rebellion. You curl up by the hearth, spoon tucked under your pillow like a prized possession. Your belly isn't full, but it's not empty. Your throat is warm. Your breath smells vaguely of garlic and barley. And that's enough, for now. You hear the motion before you see it. Raised voices. Doors creaking open. Boots crunching over packed snow. You peek out the cottage window, foggy with your breath, and spot a group of villagers huddled near the communal well. Not fetching water, arguing loudly. That can only mean one thing. Someone's stolen food. You groan. Again? You step outside, wrapping your cloak tighter against the cutting wind. It's early and your bones haven't forgiven you yet, but when there's drama, your village doesn't believe in privacy. Everyone gathers. Everyone gossips. As you approach the crowd, you catch the tail end of the shouting. Cedric, the trapper, is red-faced and flailing his arms. "It were mine, I swear it. Snared it near the bend. Hid it under me floorboards." Marta, the Reeves' wife, stands firm. "And yet somehow your snare rabbit ended up in my stew pot last night." "Are you calling me a thief, Cedric?" People murmur. Cedric sputters. You shake your head. It's not about the rabbit. Not really. It's about desperation. This time of year, every scrap of food is political. Who gets the last onion? Who still has salted meat? Who has nothing and is eyeing your pantry with twitchy hands? Winter isn't just about surviving nature. It's about surviving each other. Your grandmother used to say, "Hunger makes neighbors look like enemies and soup pots look like treasure chests." You're starting to see what she meant. You think back to last year when a goat went missing. For 2 days, no one said a word. Then a stew appeared on someone's table. Rich, fatty, suspiciously generous. The next morning, bones were found in the snow. The goat never turned up, but everyone understood what had happened. No one confessed. No one confronted, but no one forgot either. Historians still argue whether peasant communities were tight-knit or fraught with conflict. Some records show incredible cooperation, shared labor, mutual aid, community feasts. Others show court cases over stolen turnips, broken fences, and accusations of flour theft. The truth, as always, lives somewhere in between. Back at the well, Cedric's been calmed by the priest, who always manages to show up just as the yelling turns interesting. "Let us remember," he says, "we are one flock under God. Let us share our burdens and our stew." That earns a few eye rolls, but also a few nods. You feel both. You walk home, avoiding Cedric's glare. You've got your own problems. Your pantry is low, again. 2 carrots, a half bag of oats, and a sealed jar of pickled turnip that smells like regret. You were hoping to stretch it to Sunday, maybe even fast a day, but now you're thinking about sheep. Not yours, of course. You don't own a sheep. But the widow at the end of the lane does. A little ewe with a limp. Friendly. Delicious looking, if you're honest. You shake your head. That's not the path. Yet. Still, the thought lingers. Instead, you head to the communal baking oven. You've scraped together enough flour for a small loaf and booked your slot a week ago. Today, it's finally your turn. The oven is a massive thing. Stone, ancient, soot-stained. It belongs to the manor, technically, and the baker oversees it like a gatekeeper of warmth. You greet her with your usual awkward smile and hand over your dough. She inspects it, nods. Could use more yeast. You shrug. So could we all. She chuckles and slides it in. You sit by the fire and wait, stomach growling. Around you, other villagers huddle with baskets, dough wrapped in cloth, hopeful eyes on the flames. You trade gossip. Talk about Cedric's rabbit. Wonder who'll go hungry next. Then the baker pulls your loaf out. It's not pretty. Lopsided, scorched in one corner, pale in another. But it's warm. Real. You take it like it's gold. You tear off a piece. The crust crunches. The inside's dense but soft. You chew slowly, letting the heat fill your mouth and chest. You head home, tearing off chunks as you go. You pass a child with wide eyes, you pause. Tear off a bit more, hand it over. She runs off without a word. Another mouth fed. Another tiny kindness in the middle of this cold, gray world. At home, your sister eyes the loaf. You break it in half and set it beside the fire. No stew to go with it tonight, but maybe tomorrow. You eat in silence. The bread has gone too quickly, but for a few moments you feel human again. Not just a body enduring winter, but a person living through it. Outside, the snow continues to fall. Inside, the fire crackles. Warmth. Barely, but enough. Because no one stole from you today. And in this season of quiet hungers and loud silences, that's what victory looks like. The cold today has a bite to it, sharper than usual, like it's grown teeth overnight. You wrap your cloak tighter, duck your head against the wind, and clutch the coarse sack in your hands like it holds the meaning of life. Because, in a way, it does. Inside the sack is flour, barely a handful, ground from a mix of barley and rye, the kind of flour that's more grit than grain. It's destined for bread, but not in your hearth today. You're heading to the communal oven again. It's your second trip this month. Your first loaf was devoured faster than you expected, which, considering you share a cottage with 5 people, 2 of them teenagers, shouldn't have been surprising. But now, you've scraped together just enough flour for one more round. No yeast, though, no starter. Which means you'll be bartering for that elusive, invisible magic. You arrive at the oven hut and take your place in the line. The smell of rising dough and scorched crust fills the air, warm and heavy. It's oddly comforting. Inside, the baker, middle-aged, tired, perpetually covered in flour, waves you in with a nod. You glance over your shoulder and catch sight of 2 children fighting over a crust. One wins, the other sulks. You remember doing the same. You offer your sack to the baker. She unties it, pinches the flour, grunts. Could use better sifting. You nod. I'll take whatever rise I can get. She sighs. I've got starter. You want it? Yes, you say. What's the price? She eyes you. 2 eggs. You hesitate. Eggs are gold. But so is bread that doesn't sit in your gut like a whetstone. I've got dried onions, you offer. She thinks, then nods. Half a handful. The deal is made. You pass the onions over, and she spoons a bit of bubbling starter into your bowl. It smells tangy, like something alive and slightly offended. But it'll do. You mix your dough in the corner while others shape loaves. Everyone pretends not to watch each other, but they do. Who brought wheat flour? Who added herbs? Who can afford fat? Every loaf is a quiet declaration of status, luck, and desperation. Your dough is flat, heavy, stubborn. It doesn't rise much, but you pat it into shape and hand it over. 30 minutes, the baker says. You nod and settle by the fire, listening to the low hum of conversations around you. Talk turns, inevitably, to bread fraud. Did you hear about the miller? Someone says. Been mixing sawdust in the flour again? Another shakes their head. At least it's not chalk this time. Bread fraud is the open secret of peasant life. You don't get the luxury of pristine flour. Sometimes you get bark dust. Sometimes bean husks. Sometimes things you don't want to know about. The miller always denies it, of course, but people have started coughing more. Children with belly aches. And the flour? Grittier than it should be. Historians still argue how widespread these practices were. Some claim bread adulteration was rare in tight communities. Others say it was rampant, especially in times of grain shortage like this one. Either way, your teeth know the truth. When your loaf emerges from the oven, it's misshapen but beautiful in its own way. Browned at the edges, steam rising gently. You tear off a corner, it's chewy, dense, vaguely sour, but not awful, not chalky. A small miracle. You wrap it in cloth and carry it home like treasure. On the way, you pass the manor. You don't usually look. It's too frustrating. But today, you can't help yourself. The smoke from their chimney smells sweet. Roast goose, maybe. You imagine golden crusts, bubbling pies, servants carrying platters the size of your entire table. You imagine white bread, soft and pure, stacked in baskets. Your loaf feels suddenly very small in your hands. You shake the thought away. Not helpful. You've got mouths to feed. Back home, the cottage is quiet. Your sister is patching a sock. Your brother is scraping soot off a kettle with a stick. You place the loaf on the table and everyone perks up. You slice it carefully. 6 pieces, uneven of course. Nothing is perfect in winter. You pass them around. You eat in silence. The crust crunches. The inside is warm. A little bitter, a little sour, a little perfect. And then, just as you think maybe today will pass without drama, there's a knock at the door. It's the Reeve. Everyone freezes. You open the door, heart thudding. He doesn't smile. He rarely does. Got reports of stolen grain, he says. From the Lord's storehouse. Your mouth goes dry. I've done nothing, you say quickly. Maybe too quickly. He narrows his eyes. Not accusing, just asking. You see anyone carrying more flour than they should? You think of Cedric, of Marta's Rapid, of the quiet desperation that sits behind every set of eyes in this village. No, you say softly. No one. He stares a moment longer, then nods, steps back into the snow and vanishes. You close the door. Sit back down. The bread is cold now, but you eat it anyway. Because tomorrow, someone else might knock, and you want to remember what full feels like. The pantry is quiet. Not just empty, quiet. A kind of silence that hums in your chest, that makes your hands pause just a second longer on the latch, like they're bracing for bad news. You open the door anyway. You have to. Inside, 1 shriveled onion, a lump of barley flour that's more husk than grain, and a small cloth bundle of dried thyme you've been saving since summer. The rest? Gone. No beans, no oats, no root vegetables, no lard. Even the mouse that used to live behind the sack of turnips has packed up and left. This is what they call the deep winter. The middle. The stretch between maybe we have enough and we definitely don't. And if you're being honest, it's always worse than you remember. You step back and let the pantry door swing shut. The sound is soft, final. Your sister's voice cuts through the stillness. What's for dinner? You pause. Soup, you say. Again. She doesn't ask what kind. She doesn't ask what's in it. Because by now everyone knows, soup is a shapeshifter. It can be hearty and thick or nearly invisible. Tonight it will lean toward the latter. You start the fire, boil water, and stir in whatever you can find. Half an onion, some wild garlic, stale crust mashed into pulp. You scrape the bottom of the salt jar and toss in a pinch, more for hope than flavor. This is the kind of meal that doesn't fill you, it buys time. And time is what you need. Because rumor has it, the famine might be coming back. Not the little kind, where things are just tight. The real kind. the kind with names and memories, like the Great Famine of 1315, the one your grandmother talks about with a flat voice and distant eyes. She lived through the tail end of it, barely. She was 5 when the rains came and wouldn't stop. Grain rotted in the fields, hay never dried, livestock starved in the mud. People, too. Some say it was 3 years of hunger, others say 7. Historians still argue over the true scale, but the stories never change. Villages shrinking, children vanishing, bark soup, leather stew. You stir the pot and try not to think of that. This winter isn't nearly that bad. Yet, but it's bad enough. The harvest was thin, the salt fish cart didn't arrive, and then there's the bread tax. It used to be a minor annoyance. A few extra coins to use the mill or to bake at the communal oven. Now, it feels like a wall between you and survival. You've heard of villages that rebelled, that stormed the Lord's storehouse, that baked illegal bread in hidden clay ovens. You've also heard of what happened to them. Spoiler, it involved ropes, so no rebellion. Just soup. The pot bubbles gently. The onion scent is faint, barely there. You serve it out anyway. Wooden bowls, 1 scoop each. Your sister stirs hers and frowns. There's no fat, you nod. You used the last of it yesterday. She doesn't complain, just eats slowly. Later that night, you venture out to trade. You wrap yourself in everything you own, 2 cloaks, 3 scarves, a belt tight enough to bruise, and walk to old Len's cottage. Len is a hoarder, everyone knows it, but he's also fair, and weirdly generous if you catch him in a good mood. You knock. He opens the door, suspicious as always, his beard full of crumbs and secrets. What do you want? Trade. You hold up your offering, a bundle of firewood and a wooden spoon carved from you. It's smooth, beautiful. Took you a whole day to make. He squints. For what? Dried beans. He grunts. Half a scoop. You nod. It's more than you expected. Inside his cottage, the shelves are stacked. Beans, barley, smoked fish, bundles of herbs tied with string. You try not to stare. He hands you the beans in a cloth pouch. You hand over the spoon. He turns it in his hands, nods in approval, then closes the door. You walk home in the dark, the pouch warm in your hands like a heartbeat. Tomorrow you'll soak them, stretch them into stew. Maybe there'll even be leftovers. You remember a story the priest told once about a saint who turned 1 cup of lentils into an endless feast? You tried to believe it. You really did. But right now you believe in trade, in spoons, in beans that aren't made up miracles. Back home you hang the pouch by the hearth. It looks small, but it glows in the firelight like a trophy. You sit. You breathe. You're still hungry. But you have beans. And in the deep silence of a winter pantry, even that feels like wealth. Your fingers are stiff as you peel back the cloth, covering the bean pot. The beans soaked overnight, plumping ever so slightly, their wrinkled skins now smooth and taut like they're pretending to be fresh. You smile a little because beans pretending is still better than beans breaking apart into paste. It's bitter cold again, one of those mornings where even the fire feels unsure of itself. You wrap your cloak tighter and start the morning task of kindling the hearth, coaxing flame from ash like it's a fussy child. When the fire finally catches, it sighs like an old man and begins to warm the stones around it. Today's goal: warmth. In the pot, in your body, in the air, because there's no heat outside. None. Your breath fogs like smoke. The windows are rimmed with frost. Your toes are only probably still attached, but you have a plan. Broth, beans, and spices. Yes, spices. Not many. Not the rich royal kind. No saffron, no cloves. But a pinch of peppercorns, traded months ago from a traveling merchant in return for 2. Lengths of homespun wool, and a small knot of dried mustard greens. Hidden deep in the spice jar like secret treasure. You drop them into the pot with reverence. In the world of medieval peasants, spices are rare, exotic, powerful. They're the whisper of far-off lands and warmer skies. Most peasants never taste them, not unless they work in a manor kitchen or get very, very lucky. But every now and then, someone comes through with something strange and sharp and golden. Turmeric, nutmeg, cinnamon bark, if you can believe it. Your grandmother claims she once had a single grain of saffron in a wedding stew. Tasted like the sun got drunk and danced through my mouth, she said, then promptly fell asleep. You stir your pot, imagining the flavor will be enough to warm your bones. Historians still argue whether peasants use spices with any regularity. Some say the price made them utterly unattainable. Others argue that small villages near trade routes or port towns might have occasional access, especially if someone had something valuable to barter: wool, honey, metal tools. Either way, for you, spices are a once-a-winter thing, and today's the day. The stew simmers slowly, its scent lifting up with the steam. A little bitter, a little earthy, and underneath it all, something bright, something sharp. You taste it. Your lips tingle. Just slightly, you nearly cry. Food that warms from the inside is rare. Usually it's hot in temperature, but cold in spirit. Thick porridge, thin broth, flatbread that fills your stomach like a rock. But this is a different kind of warmth. A little glow that starts behind your eyes and settles into your chest. You call your sister and brother to eat. The bowls are smaller today, you're rationing, but they don't complain. They smell the spice and they know. Your brother slurps greedily. Your sister actually hums while chewing. You don't say anything. You just let it happen. After the meal, you wrap the rest of the pot in cloth and tuck it beside the hearth. Dinner will be even better after the flavors deepen. That's what your grandmother always says anyway, and you're choosing to believe her. Then you head outside. The snow crunches hard underfoot. The cold stings your eyes, but you need more wood, more herbs, more something, because winter's not over. Not by a long shot. As you walk through the woods, you spot a cluster of berries, dark, sharp-smelling, almost oily. Not for eating, but good for steeping. You gather a few. Then some pine cones for the hearth. Then a branch of dried mint, long forgotten under a drift. Small things, all of them. But when you live like this, small things aren't small. On the way back, you stop by Maud's place. She's sitting by her fire with a bandaged foot and a scowl that could curdle milk. You offer her a pinch of the peppercorns. She gives you a cube of aged cheese in return, hard as a rock, sharp enough to fight with, but real cheese. Your sister nearly faints when she sees it. You shave tiny pieces into the stew that night. Just enough to change it, to lift it. Dinner becomes a celebration. Quiet. No songs. But everyone's posture softens. The silence isn't hunger anymore, it's satisfaction. You sit by the fire after chewing the last corner of bread and stare into the flames. You think about how you've tricked the winter for one more day. Fooled it into letting you feel comfort. Into letting you be full. Into letting you believe for just a few hours that warmth can start from the inside. And you wonder what you'll trade next. Because you know it'll come again. That cold. That ache. But for now, you're warm. Your youngest sibling is crying again. It's not a loud cry, just that small, pitiful sound a child makes when they're too tired to wail and too hungry to sleep. You're not sure if it's worse than the full-blown sobs or not. All you know is that it settles in your chest like a rock and won't go away. You glance over, she's curled up near the hearth, clutching a piece of linen stuffed with straw, a makeshift doll with one button eye. Her cheeks are hollow. Her hands, too small for the world, are red from cold. There's not enough food. And this? This is the Hungry Gap. It has a name. You heard it first from the old Reeve, back when you were still small enough to be distracted by shadows. Comes every year, he said, between Candlemas and the first green things. Always does. Always will. The Hungry Gap isn't famine. Not exactly. It's the season when the stored food runs out, but the new harvest hasn't even begun to think about growing. It's purgatory with wind chill. You open the pantry, again, You don't know why you keep hoping. There's a handful of beans, maybe enough for soup if you bulk it out with foraged roots. One last onion. A crust of bread harder than the bench it's sitting on. You wrap them up like they're precious, because they are. You go outside. The snow's mostly gone, but the world isn't green yet, just brown, soggy, and stubborn. You kneel beside the garden patch, not because anything's growing, but because you want to see it. You want to remember that life still exists under this dead blanket of winter's leftovers. You dig into the soil. It's still too cold for planting, still stiff, reluctant, but you check anyway. In some places, if you're lucky, nettles start to appear this time of year. They're sharp, stinging little devils, but boiled, they're food. You find a few tiny green points pushing through the mud. A miracle. You harvest them carefully, avoiding the sting. You know the trick, fold the leaf over itself before you touch it. You fill half a basket with nettle tops and wild garlic. On the way home, you spot a few sorrel leaves clinging to life. You take those too. You're not the only one out here. You see your neighbor's boy crouched in the field, pulling something out of the ground. Parsnips, maybe, or weeds. You wave. He doesn't. Back